Imagine trying to survive in a world where every scratch could turn you into a mindless monster controlled by rampant fungi. In The Last of Us, Joel creates lethal weapons with duct tape and scissors. But in the real world, could you actually make those contraptions work? In this video, we're going to test what it would take to survive a Cordyceps apocalypse where life is like walking a tightrope over a hungry horde. Would your hammer really crack a zombie's skull when needed? Or could the makeshift knives you carry actually save you in an abandoned subway tunnel? Get ready to find out if your DIY skills would keep you breathing, or if, within just 48 hours, you'd end up as infected fodder. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. So, we all agree Joel's world is extremely brutal. But let's go straight to the science. Could a fungus actually turn humans into irrational, aggressive creatures? Most scientists say the odds are practically zero. The fungus that inspired The Last of Us, Cordyceps unilateralis, is indeed frightening for ants. But for us humans, it's a whole different story. In real life, this fungus acts like a puppet master for insects. When it infects a carpenter ant, it takes control of the ant's nervous system, causing the ant to leave its colony and climb to a higher spot. This elevated position benefits the fungus's reproduction as it grows inside the insect's body and then bursts through the head, releasing spores that infect more ants below. Sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But let's understand why it wouldn't so easily apply to humans. This extremely sophisticated mind control is the result of millions of years of coevolution between the fungus and ants. Jumping from controlling an insect with around 250,000 neurons to directing our brain, which has about 86 billion, would be like going straight from riding a bicycle to blindly piloting a fighter jet. Moreover, fungi like Cordyceps tend to be highly specialized. Each species usually infects only one specific type of insect. The fungus that dominates ants isn't even capable of infecting other types of insects, let alone mammals. However, before you get too comfortable, know that climate change is giving rise to new fungal threats that do indeed concern us. In recent years, more than 700 cases of Candida auris were reported in the United States alone, a fungus unknown to medicine before 2009. Some more recent reports already speak of over 2,000 total cases, showing an upward trend. According to the WHO, World Health Organization, this species adapts to higher body temperatures, which traditionally served as a barrier to various types of fungi. According to Dr. Roberts, a researcher focused on emerging pathogens, Candida auris can be transmitted from person to person, something rare in the fungal kingdom. Why does this matter in the context of a The Last of Us style apocalypse? Because if more fungi adapt to our body temperature, the risk of large-scale fungal infections could increase. We're not talking about zombies connected by mycelium, but real outbreaks that are already overwhelming hospitals. Another worrying factor is the indiscriminate use of antibiotics, which throws our microbiota out of balance. When beneficial bacteria are wiped out, opportunistic fungi find fertile ground to spread. Add to that the aging global population and the rise in people with weakened immune systems, and you have a scenario more conducive to fungal infections. Still, we would hardly witness out-of-control hordes of humans infected in a Cordyceps-like manner. The transmission mode and the actions of these emerging fungi are very different from what we see in Neil Druckmann's fiction. On the other hand, the collapse of infrastructure, resource conflicts, and factional violence we see in The Last of Us do have historical precedents and are entirely plausible. Speaking of precedents, we'll soon examine whether Joel's improvised weapons would actually work in practice. But first, if you enjoy this kind of analysis, click subscribe and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss a single detail of our upcoming discussions. When society falls apart, survivors depend on their improvisational skills. But would the weapons you create keep you alive? That classic scene of Joel taping scissors to a board makes it look easy, but reality can be much harsher. For instance, the human skull requires about 12 kilograms force, approximately 125 newtons, to be punctured, and that's no small feat. Many improvised weapons don't generate enough energy or can't withstand repeated impact, so all those scissors wrapped in tape could very well fail when you need them most. No, wait! Let's start with Joel's iconic shiv, a scissor blade wrapped in duct tape. On screen, it looks deadly, but in the real world, the tape wouldn't provide adequate grip if your hands were sweaty or covered in blood. Plus, a standard scissor blade isn't designed to withstand the impact against bone. It could bend or break when hitting something hard like a skull or even a rib. One successful strike might happen, but by the second or third use, you'd be left empty-handed. The physics of an effective weapon is simple: mass times acceleration. The greater the mass, the harder the impact, provided you can handle it. That's why hammers, axes, and iron bars are more effective improvised weapons. If you're afraid of breaking your own foot by dropping a hammer from a decent height, that's a good sign it can do some real damage. But each hit wears you out quickly. Hand-to-hand combat training studies show that an average person can lose up to 40% of their strength after just a few consecutive strikes, especially under extreme stress. The items Joel makes can be divided into practical categories. Close combat weapons, like maces with nails or pieces of sharp metal, have destructive power but force you into dangerously close quarters. Garrots made from guitar strings or phone cables are lethal if used correctly and quietly, but they require good technique and nerves of steel to pull off the strangulation. Improvised ranged weapons like zip guns or powerful slingshots offer the advantage of distance, but instability is a big problem. Homemade firearms can blow up in your hand if the pressure chamber is poorly constructed. Trap mines and explosives, seen in The Last of Us. Part 2 require very specific materials. And remember, 20 years after the collapse, most of those resources would be scarce or deteriorated. Another crucial point is duct tape itself. Products like duct tape have a shelf life and lose their stickiness over time, especially in humid or very hot environments. In a real-world context, each passing year would make it harder to find something to replace one of the main crafting tools that the game shows in abundance. Plus, repeatedly using an improvised weapon demands skill and physical conditioning that the game simplifies. Fighting with a nail-studded bat, for example, places a lot of strain on your arms and wrists. After 1 or 2 strikes, you might be in pain that reduces your accuracy. The harsh truth is that even if it were possible to create some of those weapons, their durability and reliability would be much lower than the game suggests. You'd need a plan B, C, and even D for situations requiring force or stealth. Weapons might break in your hands, but what about your mind? Making Molotov cocktails and homemade knives is one challenge, but the biggest impossibility in The Last of Us might be developing the psychological armor that Joel displays. His journey, from loving father to hardened survivor, involved a moral reset that would break most people long before they face their first clicker. When Joel tortures someone for information or executes fireflies who surrender their weapons, we're seeing the concept of moral injury at work, a deep trauma that arises when someone violates their own ethical values. Now imagine the scene: an enemy begging for their life, your finger on the trigger, knowing that pulling it might save someone you love. Would you do it? And if you did, could you sleep that night? Research with war veterans shows that taking a life can generate unbearable guilt and shame. These feelings reshape your identity and trust in others. With every death, every ethical line crossed, the psychological weight grows. What's most surprising about Joel is his apparent immunity to that trauma, at least most of the time. The game rarely shows Joel having intense nightmares or crises over the lives he's taken. That's almost superhuman, because most of us would suffer from depression, anxiety, or even suicidal thoughts after repeated brutal acts. HBO's adaptation delves a bit more into Joel's traumas, but still in a condensed way. In reality, a survivor experiencing repeated lethal conflicts would bear severe mental scars, possibly resulting in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. This includes constant nightmares, flashbacks, and a state of hypervigilance that prevents real rest. Sleep deprivation is an underrated factor. A study published in Nature and Science of Sleep indicates that even after a single night of poor sleep, your reaction time drops significantly. Now imagine days or weeks of fragmented sleep, waking at every creak in the night. fearing ambushes, or infected. In no time, your motor coordination and reasoning would be seriously compromised. This extreme fatigue also weakens the immune system, leaving you more prone to illnesses that, in a world without available medications, could be fatal. In other words, your worst enemy might be your own deteriorating mental and physical health over time. Then there's the dilemma between the coldness required to survive and the need to form relationships with others to build alliances. Traits of distrust and brutality, crucial for initial survival, can end up isolating you in the long run, making agreements impossible and community life nearly unattainable. Joel and Tess work together because they have similar personalities, but most of us would struggle to balance the necessary aggression with the vital empathy for lasting partnerships.
You ready?
Yeah.
In The Last of Us, Joel finds a form of redemption and motivation in Ellie. Studies show that strong emotional bonds can help mitigate some of the effects of post-traumatic stress because they give meaning to violent actions. But that doesn't erase accumulated guilt. It only makes it bearable enough to keep going. After dissecting every aspect of Joel's survival in The Last of Us, what's the verdict? Could you survive? Probably not, but that doesn't mean all hope is lost. Psychological research suggests that having something or someone to fight for dramatically increases your chances of persevering in extreme conditions. If you want to keep following analyses like this and dive into other post-apocalyptic or even sci-fi scenarios, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. After all, information and discussion are our best tools for understanding the thin line between fiction and reality.